the European Union is demanding compensation from any future UK government that pulls out of a new post-Brexit reset deal. EU diplomats privately call it a Farage clause, a bit like Santa Claus, aimed at deterring a future reform UK government from tearing up the deal. According to proposals seen by the Financial Times newspaper, the clause would force Britain to pay significant compensation if it withdraws from any future deal with the EU. Joining me now is Chief Advisor on Global Affairs to Reform UK, Alan Mendoza. Alan, in a long list of things that are a bit bonkers this year already, and we're only on day, 11? What do you make of this one? This one just, it doesn't sound legal for a start.
Sorry, I was just on mute. It may well be legal, but it's not cricket, as they say. I mean, the British people have not been asked about this. The British people, on the contrary, said we should have less to do with the EU, not more. This government did not go into the last election saying it was going to do deals like this. And if it does a deal like this, which essentially ties the hands of future governments, it will have a lot to answer for. And I suspect there probably will be a legal challenge in the sense to say this is not a sensible policy approach for any government to be taking, because, of course, this is not something that people have approved. So what's the game here?
And what have you spoken to Nigel Farage about it? What does Nigel say about it himself?
Well, I haven't spoken to him directly on this issue, and he will speak for himself, of course, on what he wants to say. But quite clearly, Reform UK's position has been to obviously want to renegotiate Britain's status with all these European deals in the other direction, to have more freedom and to have more flexibility rather than being locked into things, which sounds suspiciously like EU by the back door. You know, again, this is something the British people, when they were last asked about it, rejected forthright. And the idea that suddenly we're going to be corralled into deals that, end up having punishment clauses if we want to then, a new government comes in and wants to change that, seems to me entirely unfair.
I mean, Alan, look, 10 years ago now, this is 10 years we're talking about this subject. But are you surprised that a government that is thinking about getting rid of jury service, introducing digital ID, is monitoring our social media this extent? Are you surprised that they would sort of like override democracy in this way, or is it something we're all becoming to expect?
Well, you've set it up nicely by pointing out all the anti-democratic measures this government is pushing through. I mean, let's add, the delaying elections bit as well is a significant one, isn't it? In terms of saying that people will not be allowed to vote actually in elections they're supposed to be having this year. So, yeah, there's a definite trend here, an authoritarian trend from this government. And I suspect it's because the government knows it's so unpopular. And as a result, it's trying to push through as much significant change as it can do in a bid to try and fundamentally transform this country before it gets voted out. So it is an anti-democratic measure, full stop. And the idea, again, that we're going to be signing deals with the EU that make it very difficult, or, there's a punishment involved if we try and change them down the line, is really anti-democratic and sort of authoritarianism, I wouldn't even say by the back door, but by the front door.
Well,
so where are we going with this?
Well, yeah, good question, Alan. So if Starmer does go ahead with this, what do Reform intend to do?
Well, I think you flagged up the tweet that Nigel Farage put up. Basically, regardless of what this government attempts to do in terms of binding the hands of its successors, a Reform government will get us out of a deal like this. And it will do so with whatever means are necessary and at minimal cost to the British public to enable a way that we can restore the sovereignty that this government appears to be undermining.
It is quite an astonishing situation. Alan, while I've got you, can I just mention the situation on Iran for you? Nigel Farage has this morning in one of the papers described Keir Starmer as spineless Starmer when it comes to, and a military pygmy when it comes to our armed forces. I mean, obviously the situation in Iran is very serious. We've also got the situation in Greenland developing. How are Reform going to handle this situation? And do you think that Starmer is indeed spineless?
Well, of course he's spineless. Look at his disastrous foreign policy to date. So far, it's consisted of giving away British territories like the Chagos Islands, and paying, of course, people to do that. Now, by the way, contrast that with how Donald Trump acted when US interests were fundamentally threatening Venezuela. The difference is so extraordinary. Trump acted and asserted US rights and US kind of privileges to arrest Maduro, etc., whereas Starmer gives away British possessions, even when they're not legally challenged formally, and pays people for the privilege. So there's your weakness out there. Then, of course, you've got the fact that we now know there's a massive black hole. Military chiefs have said a nearly £30 billion black hole in defence spending, which Starmer hasn't addressed and doesn't know how to address. And then we've got, sort of seemingly open-ended commitments to putting troops into Ukraine. He won't tell us what he's agreed with President Macron and President Zelensky. And of course, there's no fundamental issue with putting British troops into Ukraine, but there is a fundamental issue if they're there permanently and it's a massive number that the British Army cannot support and cannot put in there. That is a different kettle of fish completely. So we've got those issues there, and we have a sense that he's not on the side of the protesters in Iran, although there was a fairly neutral tweet this morning saying we're interested in a peaceful transition. What's he got to understand about this regime? This regime is not peaceful. This regime is shooting Iranian demonstrators on the streets already. That's not a peaceful transition. It's war out there, and we've got to take a side. Are we with the regime or with the people who want to topple it and want freedom?
Indeed, yeah. Strong words indeed, as always. Thank you very much, Alan. That is Chief Advisor on Global Affairs to Reform UK, Alan Mendoza. Thank you very much for joining us. And as always, let me know what you think. gbnews.com/your say.
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living. And maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade. And in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney. Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind the more money you see in your bank balance, and that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
Now, we are leading, obviously, with the events in Iran, as it's been confirmed 116 people have been killed since protests began 2 weeks ago. Iran has warned Washington it will retaliate to any attack by treating Israel and US military bases as legitimate targets. That's as reports emerge that his administration is discussing how to carry out a military strike on the country, with former CIA officials warning that the president could greenlight covert operations to destabilise the regime. And the protests have been taking place across the world, including Britain, with the Iranian flag torn down by protesters at the embassy in London and replaced with the pre-Islamic Revolution Lion and Sun flag. Amazing. Well, joining me now is Iranian human rights campaigner Lily Mu, who was actually at the embassy yesterday. Lily, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing scenes at the embassy yesterday. You were there.
Heroic.
Tell me about it.
So this was an absolute act of heroism. What happened when that young man took the Iranian flag, the true Iranian flag with the lion and the sun, just like I have here on my nails and on my hands, and climbed the building of the occupied Iranian embassy at the hands of the Islamic Republic. He risked his life by doing so, because we must remember that every embassy and the land is given sovereignty of that country. So this young man standing on the balcony of the Iranian embassy, the occupied Iranian embassy, was risking his life. He could have been dragged in and we could have never, ever seen him again, because executions are part of the law of this very regime. Now, what we had yesterday in London outside the Iranian embassy was an absolute act of unity and courage of British Iranians and their friends getting together and calling out for regime change and calling for unity with the Iranian people inside of Iran. Iranian people are unfortunately under a digital blackout. Currently, as the Islamic Republic is turning the cities into darkness and switching off the lights, Iranian people came together in an act of courage and unity in Tehran, and they turned on their mobile phones' lights. They knew that when they go home, they might not have access to electricity to recharge their batteries. They knew they might lose connection with the world even for a longer time, because this regime has a habit of switching off electricity in the broad cities around the country. And they turned on their lights so that the world would know, the eyes on Iran will know how many people were in Tehran on the streets last night.
Because this is the way the Iranian regime operates, isn't it? It closes things down. It stops people talking out. It stops people like you getting the message out there about what's really going on the ground. Now, some of the stories that we did manage to get hold of last night.
Thank you.
About what was really going on. I mean, horrific stories of our people who had been protesting being hunted down in hospital.
Absolutely.
And also people being blinded.
Yes, this is one of the most common tactics of this regime, is using pellet guns or even the water cannons to shoot at people's faces, because the pressure of the water is very high and it could actually explode the eye. What they have done, I am friends with quite a few of the survivors of the attacks on the eyes from the 2022 national uprising in Iran, and they are doing it again. They are targeting the future sight of Iran. They want to have a blind generation, and they are targeting the faces of our children. This is the brutality of this regime.
What I don't understand, Lily, is why we had free Palestine marches across the UK, in America. We saw huge numbers of people demonstrating about what was happening in Gaza.
Yes.
Why are we not seeing, given the level of brutality against the Iranian people, as you say, deliberately blinding children, why are we not seeing that on our streets now?
So I have one very important point to mention here for most of your viewers who do not know, and they usually they tune into Westminster from across the country to see what is happening and why is it that the streets of London is being flooded with Palestinian flags and anti-Semitic chants such as "River to the Sea." There is absolute silence on Iranians, and Iranians are also a Muslim. Let's not forget, 98% of Iranians carry Islamic names at the moment, because this regime has banned Persian names. So just in name alone, if they are Muslim, that should be enough for the Islamic community around the world to show solidarity with the people who are dying at the hands of a terrorist regime. They say they don't stand for terrorism. They say they are freedom fighters. But the only thing these people are fighting is freedom itself, freedom of Iranian people, freedom of the international community, freedom and balance in the West. The past 2 years, as we witnessed, was an absolute organized dismantling of reality for the mind of an everyday Westerner through buzzwords and targeted messaging after messaging in everyday major media outlets. Those media outlets are extremely quiet today, but that's quite okay. Iranian people are loud and Iranian people are clear. The message is sound. Make as much white noise as you want. Iranian people are being heard by the leaders of the world who are willing to take action. And I encourage our Prime Minister to do the same. Take action against the very regime that is now currently setting route using IRGC in London. The Khamenei, the supreme leader, who he calls himself that, has an office in Westminster. We demand that that office is closed. We demand that IRGC is prescribed as a terrorist organization, because they are indeed a terrorist organization. And that is indeed the reason why we are rallying outside number 10 today. Because for the past 3 years, as I personally, along with so many other Iranian activists in the UK and throughout the diaspora, we have been calling for the prescription of this terrorist organization into that list. On top of that, I have another message for the Prime Minister. You need to start looking for prisons for these people, because terrorists need to go into prisons. And no, we in the UK do not welcome refugees from the Islamic Republic. We welcome refugees of Iran, as we have so far. Iranian people who have had to flee execution and torture and rape, they have come here. But as they reached here, their enemies followed them.
Yeah.
Put those enemies away.
Okay.
IRGC must be prescribed.
Okay. Lily, thank you so much. Very strong opinions there. And you are having the rally in London today at 3 o'clock.
At 3 o'clock. 2:30, gathering begins. 4 p.m. our rally ends. But I want to give you a warning, people. UK lovelies, my dear British people, my friends who have been alongside me all of these years, there is a menacing group called the MEK, which is an ally of the regime, currently reciting a protest right next to my rally.
Oh, right. Okay.
They do not represent Iran.
OK. Lily, do you want to just stand up and give Camera 3 a quick twirl of your skirt?
Absolutely.
And Lily always looks amazing, but she has...
Thank you for doing this. I want to raise awareness regarding this wonderful, wonderful
Perfect.
piece.
Lily, you look amazing. Amazing call. Good luck this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
for joining us.
Thank
OK, now, obviously, very strong views from Lily there, so let me know what you're making of what Lily's had to say.